Welcome to What's Working. Hope you'll enjoy the show today. I reached out to a guy whose book I had bought off of Amazon, and I do this from time to time just to see if they'll respond. And sure enough, he did. And we're going to meet him in this week's episode. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's show. What's Working is about the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace trends shaping the workplace, the workforce, and the marketplace around us, trying to find guests all the time that can give us insights into what's going on out there in the world of work. And hopefully something they say will make each of us a little bit better at whatever it is that we do. So the book that I bought off of Amazon is called Leading with Questions. I'm holding a copy of it in my hand. And the reason I'm holding it is I have been on a mission, maybe a quest, that's begun this past spring that continues through this day of creating a kind of a workshop-y thing. And I'll tell you more about this as time goes on, that I want to run that will hopefully begin in the winter or the spring of next year. That's designed to really enhance a person's communication skills. And good Lord knows, when you say communication skills, it's a broad term. It means everything. It reminds me of people that I meet who say they are in marketing. Marketing means everything. The guy standing on Bourbon Street barking out the door to get you to come in and spend money at his bar is considered a marketer, probably on his resume somewhere. Just like somebody that works for Nike or Apple and talks about their products also considers themselves a marketer. Marketer means everything. Communication skills means everything. But the course that I'm developing here will include 3 parts. Number 1, how to communicate better as you speak. Number 2, how to listen better. A key part of communication is not only delivering content, but also listening as others deliver their content. And the third part, which has led to the book, is how to ask questions. So we're going to work on these 3 things in the course, and I thought, well, the one that I know least about, I think, is the questioning part. Where can I train myself up on this? Which led me to this book, Leading with Questions, How Leaders Discover Powerful Answers by Knowing How and What Questions to Ask. I reached out to Michael Marquardt and Bob Tiede, co-authors of the book, and Bob Tiede quickly responded. He's going to be on the show after we get back from break, and he sent me another copy of this book, which means I now have 2. One of them is marked up thoroughly from my pen and pencil marks to prepare for today's interview. The other one will become a gift to somebody who I feel like would benefit from this thing. On a different note, but similar, recently been on this biography kick. I can't explain where these fascinations come from. The most recent fascination has been reading biographies. I've read Walter Isaacson's, who, by the way, I've tried to get on the show, Walter Isaacson's 3 biographies that I like the most, one of them on Elon Musk, one of them on Steve Jobs, one of them on Leonardo da Vinci. Really good. What these 3 men that Isaacson has written about have in common is a thirst for content and information and a exhaustive demand, an exhaustive list of questions that they were asking constantly. In the case of Musk, I assume, continues to ask constantly. And one of the things that made Da Vinci so unique is that the notes that he would make for himself in the margins of his work were all questions that he wanted to know the answers to, and he had this thirst for these things. These questions that are available to each of us make us leaders, make us better equipped to get through any given day by just this thirst for information. It's a key part of communication, which is part of why I will include it in this workshop that will begin in the winter or spring, and the key reason that I asked Bob Tiede to be on the show with me today. Again, his book is Leading with Questions. It's on its 3rd edition, published by Wiley. And when we get back from break, he'll be on the other side of a Zoom call with me. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. We'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. We're back. You're listening to What's Working. I'm Cam Marston. Again, thanks for joining us on today's show. On the other side of the Zoom call is Bob Tiede. His book is Leading with Questions, How Leaders Discover Powerful Answers and Knowing How and What to Ask. This is the third edition, which he is a part of, co-authored with Michael J. Marquardt. That's a name that I might need you to help me correct, Bob, if I've mispronounced that. But before all that, first and foremost, thank you so much for your time and welcome to What's Working.
Cam, I'm honored to be your guest today.
It's nice of you to say. I love the title of your book. I've been reading a lot of biographies lately, and one of the things that all these great people have in common is their thirst, their curiosity, their limitless questions. The one that comes to mind the most is Leonardo da Vinci and his persistence with questions. I'll share a story with you that I've shared on this show before. It was in the Biltmore House in Asheville, North Carolina, where I was asked to leave the tour. My wife loves telling the story because we were only in the second room and I had asked too many questions, and she said we're already 1 hour behind schedule due to your question. So I have a fascination with questions. I think I don't know how and when to ask them is the problem. So we'll begin there. Tell me a little bit first about your background, what got you into this, and why this whole idea of questions has become such a passion of your own.
Well, Cam, when people hear that I have a blog, Leading with Questions, I've written books about questions, they think, I bet questioning and asking questions just comes naturally to Bob. And my response is, oh, I wish it did. I wish it did. I, by nature, am a teller. Whenever I speak, I start with a confession. My confession is that for most of my career, I was a benevolent dictator. And not out of evil intent, but the only paradigm of leadership I had was I thought the job of a leader was to figure out what needs to be done and then to kindly ask your staff to do it.
Yeah.
And tell them what to do and use, I said benevolent dictator. I grew up in a home, Cam, where I was taught to say please and thank you. So Cam, if you'd been on my team, I don't think I ever would have said, hey, Cam, go do this. It'd have been more like, hey, Cam, here's what we're working on. It'd really be great if you could please do this.
Right.
And when you did it, I would have said, Cam, thank you at a staff meeting. Cam, stand up. You all need to hear what Cam did. But again, my only paradigm of leadership was I thought the job of a leader was to tell his or her staff what to do. And for me, that changed in 2006. Now, Kim, I'm guessing you love books like I love books.
Yeah.
And my wife loves to go to bookstores, but she goes all over the bookstore. She knows when she's done, she'll still find me in the leadership section. And my practice is to find 2-3 books I've never seen before, find a chair, peruse them, see if I'm going to buy any. Well, in 2006, I discovered the first edition of Leading with Questions. Perusing only a few pages, like, hey, this one's a keeper. I'm taking it home. It was a page turner. But Kim, I had no idea when I purchased it that it would actually change my leadership forever.
Oh.
As I read that book, filled with stories of leaders literally from around the globe, not just the U.S., and the questions they were asking, it made like instant sense to me. It's like I instantly saw leaders who lead with questions and be more effective. And Cam, I had only one question as I read the book. Why hasn't anyone ever shared this with me before? I was an instant convert.
One of the things that your book has emphasized for me is that when we make statements or tell, I guess, statements and telling are the similar, the same perhaps, it allows someone to get on the other side of that statement and to disagree. Whereas questions create unity. Statements can create division, yet questions create unity. Expand on that for me, please.
Well, Cam, two questions I love to ask, and I say, which one of these is true? If you meet somebody new, and you take 80% of the time telling them about yourself, they will almost always mistrust you. Or you meet someone new and you ask them questions and let them do 80% of the talking, they will almost always trust you. Well, it's a bit of a trick question, Cam, in that they're both true.
Yeah.
But don't we think, hey, I meet Cam, if I can just tell him about Bob, myself, well, he'll love me.
Yeah.
But what we don't know is if we monopolize and we just tell about ourselves, Cam actually thinks to himself, this guy is full of it.
Yeah.
But when the other person asks questions and finds out about the other person, at the end of the time, like if you're doing business, don't even be surprised if that other person says, yeah, hey, I want to buy from you. And you're thinking, you don't even know about me. But they trusted you because you listened. And you're so right. We make statements and people think about, I might disagree with that. But when we ask questions, it's another way. And Cam, some of my research that I've found, not original, but research I've found that there's so much that's fascinating. One of the things is the person who asks questions. Now, they might think to themselves, well, if I ask a question, the other person will think I'm dumb because I don't know the answer. Actually, research shows the opposite.
Interesting.
When someone asks a question, let's say, somebody asks a question of you, Cam. Well, first of all, you're honored that they would ask you. Second, you actually perceive them to be smart. And I find that, it's counterintuitive, but when we ask questions, other people feel complimented. And, this is such Cam, you've heard this. We only get answers to the questions we ask.
Yeah. So let me ask you to react to this. And I want to ask you, is this something that we can teach people? If I have subordinates, I want to teach them how to ask questions. Is this a learnable, trainable behavior? Is this a natural, like Da Vinci? It was natural. Elon Musk, I just finished his biography. It's a natural characteristic of his to ask lots of questions. But I was sitting at a 4th of July party, 4th of July, not too long ago, and amongst a group of guys, as the women were in the opposite room talking, and not a one of them asked a question of anyone else. Not a one of them asked a question that they weren't essentially queuing up their own answer to. And I left that thinking, I'm not sure how much more time I'd want to spend around these guys. They're not curious.
Yes.
React to that for me. Tell me what I experienced that evening.
Well, sadly, Cam, what you experienced was normal.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. I wish it wasn't, but it was normal. But, your earlier question is, can this be taught? And to the one who understands, wow, if I ask questions, I'd be more effective. The answer is absolutely yes. Another thing, whenever I speak, I ask my audience, who here would like to learn to lead with questions in 30 seconds?
Yeah.
Every hand goes up.
Hands up, sure.
And I say, now, the reason I've asked this is so often I sense from my audiences that they'd like to learn to lead with questions, but they imagine they'll have to get a master's degree in questionology. Nice idea, but won't ever happen. So when they hear 30 seconds, it's like, Bob, teach me. And so, Cam, I always pull somebody from the audience up. And today, Cam, you're my audience, so I'm pulling you up. And as they come up, I always say, I've chosen Cam because I think he has a photographic memory.
Oh, boy.
He's only going to have to hear my 4 favorite questions one time, and he'll have them memorized. Now, Cam, I have a second hand on my watch, and here's how it's going to work. When I start,
Bob, let's punt on this. Let's call this a cliffhanger because we're coming up to the break.
Okay.
How does that sound?
Fantastic.
So we're coming up to the break, and we're going to all learn how to get a PhD in questionology after the break. I'm on a Zoom call with Bob Tiede, his book that I have in my hand here. And Bob, I'm looking for something I highlighted this morning and I can't find. The book is called Leading with Questions, How Leaders Discover Powerful Answers by Knowing How and What Questions to Ask. I'll have more with Bob when we come back from this break. I think we have the seeds here of how to make each of us fascinating people. And we'll get back to that as soon as the break's over. You're listening to What's Working. Be right back.
This is Bill Eastet. I perfected my baking recipe behind my live music stage at my little restaurant in Fairhope, Alabama. We have custom-made smokers and small batch bacon made just for you. So if you're looking for the best bacon in America that has been cured, smoked, and even serenaded by songwriters, you definitely need to try Billy's Small Batch Bacon. www.billysbacon.com.
Bob Tiede is zooming in on a Zoom call. His book is called Leading with Questions, and just prior to the break, he was about to give me a PhD in questionology. He made the assumption that I have a photographic memory. Bob, let's go ahead and let me disappoint you.
Cam, you won't. Again,
what are your questions?
The question is, who here would like to lead with questions in 30 seconds? And so,
Me.
Cam, we're going to see if this works. I have a second hand on my watch. My clock will start when I say my first favorite question. I'm then going to share all 4. I'm then going to say, Cam, do you have them memorized? And you will. And I'll say, share them with us. And upon you sharing all 4, when you end with the 4th one, the clock will stop. So let's see if we can get this done in 30 seconds. Are you ready?
All right.
Cam, my first favorite question is, what do you think? Second, what else? Third, what else? Fourth, what else? Cam, do you have them memorized?
I think I do. I think I found the pattern. What do you think? What else? What else? And what else? And I suppose we could what else till the cows come home.
Cam, 20 seconds. I'm going to have to change this.
Oh, yeah. I'm a remarkable student.
Cam, I'm just guessing that some in the audience are just a little skeptical, like, Bob, Cam, you can't ask somebody, what do you think? What else? What else? What else? And I said, well, not in that rapid fashion. But first, you're going to add a topic to that first question. Hey, what do you think we ought to do about? How do we take it? What do you think we could do to take advantage of this? What could we do to solve this problem? You're going to add a topic. And of course, when you ask somebody a question, they will give you an answer. Now, before I understood this, Cam, it was like my cycle was when I did ask a question, I asked a question, I got their answer, they paused, and I moved on. I didn't understand that, again, research shows that when we're asked to give an opinion on something, we instinctively, we're not thinking through this, but instinctively, we roll out a safe answer. We're testing the waters. So if I ask Cam, hey, what do you think about, and you give me that first answer, and I then said, well, Cam, that's stupid. Everyone knows that. Well, you're sorry you answered. I'm not going to get anything more. And next time I ask, I'll probably get nothing. But when I say, wow, Cam, that's good. What else? Well, Cam relaxes, thinks, wow, Bob appreciates what I'm sharing. And now Cam shares more. And again, when he pauses, instead of moving on, I'm likely to grab a pen and say, Cam, this is golden. Please continue. Say more about this. And Cam, what I've discovered, it's actually the third and fourth question that gets to their gold nugget, their very best thought.
Interesting. That's often been my bias, is it takes 2 to 3 to get to the good stuff.
Yes. And, there's other ways to ask that what else question. Hey, say more about that. Hey, I'm
Right.
taking notes. Please continue. This is really good. I'd love to hear more, and various ways. And again, the promise was if you've been a leader out there who only leads by telling, one of the things I love about leading with questions is so many of the greatest questions are so simple. They're not long, complicated, run on sentences or questions. It's whatever the topic is. Hey, what do you think we might do here?
So give me a story, if you will, Bob. Your book here is full of stories of leaders. And by the way, I found what I'd highlighted and I was looking for. Carl Rogers. I want to get into that with you. Of a leader who was able to galvanize his team or her team, not by telling, but by asking. And the results of that, if you would. Is something immediately leap to mind?
No.
I asked a question that you couldn't answer. But it seems to me that this transition that you made from benevolent dictator of let me tell you to let me ask you probably had an impact on the teams around you, and much like throughout the book, had an impact on the leaders who said, I've learned to ask questions. Tell me, how did they learn this in a way that's different than you telling them to do it?
I do remember a story now. It's one of my favorites.
Here we go.
I was teaching this with a group, and it was over a couple of days. And on the second morning, before we got started, a mom, now a professional, but she's also a mother,
sure,
said, I just have to share this with the group. She said, my son, he's very polite. He had graduated from university. He was working at a bank. And she said, he calls frequently. And whenever he calls, I ask him, what he's doing. And then I tell him what he ought to do.
Yeah.
And she said, he's so polite. He just kind of puts up with his mom. But she said, because of what Bob shared yesterday, when he called last night, rather than telling him what to do, I just asked him, what do you think you should do?
Right.
And what else? And what else? And she said, Bob, but she was also speaking to the group, I think it was the best conversation I ever had with my son.
Right.
And, I could have paid her. I didn't. but I wish I could have had her in every audience I've ever done, because I could just see, using the term the nickel drop, everybody else, her little testimony of that conversation with her son, everyone else kind of like, wow, this works.
Yeah. Yeah. We had a guy on the show not long ago talking about kids and parenting. And one of his comments was, we've got to let these kids be the author of their own future more often than not. And similar is this mom who began asking the questions of her children. Let me transition real quick to something that I think it really caught me off guard in regards to the questions that you talk about. And this is using questions and leading people. Perhaps that's the title of the chapter on page 131. And this is Carl Rogers. And it reads this: one of the most influential leaders in humanist psychology notes that three conditions, genuineness, empathetic understanding, and positive regard, are necessary if we are to help change the person we're with. What does that mean? It's asking me to think about the person to whom I am asking a question with these three things in the forefront of my mind in order to change them. And it seems as if it's a psychological stance that I've got to take as a questioner. Can you expand on that for me?
Well, yes. All of us, it's a human trait. We love to be seen and we love to be heard.
Right.
And so when somebody, obviously, when you're asked a question, that person is communicating just by their action that they see you. But when they ask and listen and empathetically, it's like, wow, you feel valued. Another question I ask people is whenever you've had a boss, someone you reported to, ask you, what do you think we ought to do here? How did that make you feel?
Right.
And they said, well, wow, I felt valued. And like, wow, my boss thinks I have a brain.
Yeah.
I have something to offer. And I've said, well, if that's how you and I have felt whenever we've had a superior ask us for input, how will our staff feel when we ask them? And of course, the same.
Here's what, in order to do this, what we're talking about right here, and I just noticed we're coming up to break, we've got to get out of the position of being the teller leader and the unconditional positive regard recipient of the questions that we ask. And that's a tough position for anybody that's used to bossing people around, to have to take that alternative point of view of, I need to consider this subordinate as a source of great intellect. And let's pick up on that after we get back from break. I'm with Bob Tiede. He's on the other side of a Zoom call. We're talking about his book, Leading with Questions. You're listening to What's Working. We'll be right back.
This is Seth Cherniak, Vice President of Branch Development for the Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group. If you're an experienced financial advisor wanting the freedom of independence, but aren't sure making that jump is right for you, we should talk. Jeffrey Matthews has developed a successful program for advisors who don't want to be 1099 contractors and don't want to pay for their own overhead. We're looking for advisors who want the freedom to run their business the way they see fit, with the support that comes with a W-2 firm. If you're interested in joining one of our branches, or if you want to open your own branch as a full-time employee, let's chat. Our compensation plan is one of the most competitive among all W-2 firms, big or small. Reach out to us today at jeffreymatthews.com, connect with me, Seth Cherniak, on LinkedIn, or click the link in the podcast.
Jeffrey Matthews Financial Group, member FINRA, SIPC. The book is called Leading with Questions: How Leaders Discover Powerful Answers by Knowing How and What Questions to Ask. It's co-authored by Michael Marquardt and Bob Tiede, and Bob Tiede's on the other side of a Zoom call with me today. Bob, what is it that leaders most need to know about questions? My listeners, I'm proud of my listeners. They're largely workplace leaders. What do they need to know?
Well, one of the things that I love to share is a leader who will lead with questions will often be 10 times more effective than a leader who leads by telling. And I've yet to meet a leader that doesn't want to be more effective.
Sure.
It's like, how can I? Well, Cam, let me share kind of two word pictures here. And at the end of the first one, I have a silly question, but I'm going somewhere, so go with me.
Yep.
But imagine you're in a big canoe with your whole team, you and 9 others on your team. And there's there's oars for everyone. And you want to get that canoe across the lake as quick as possible. How many of them would you want to have row with you?
All of them, everybody.
Yeah, I told you it's a silly question. But now imagine that same team, you and your 9 team members are around your conference table. And on your table is an opportunity. And you're taking some time to share what that opportunity is. Now, Kim, listen carefully. If you're a leader like I used to be, the benevolent dictator, and you think it's your job to figure out how to take advantage of the opportunity, and then you're going to tell them what to do, how many mental oars are in the water trying to figure out what to do?
I'm the only mental oar.
Yeah,
One.
only one. But if you're a leader who leads with questions, and so you share that opportunity, and then you look around, make eye contact with your team members, and you say, hey, what do you all think we might do?
Right.
Now, how many mental lures might be in the water?
Let's hope you got all 10, because they see the opportunity just like you do, and they're eager to contribute to the solution.
What is the probability, Kim, that one of them might have an idea better than yours?
Very unlikely. I know my ideas are always the best. No, I recognize what you're saying. There might be a different point of view in there that would startle me and make me realize mine was not the only idea.
It's certainly not a guarantee, but just the fact you're hearing 9 other ideas, the probability is it does increase.
Yeah.
So let's just imagine seated across the table is Sarah, and Sarah shares an idea, and you think to yourself, wow, that's brilliant. So you look Sarah in the eye and you say, Sarah, love that idea. In fact, Sarah, would you be willing to execute that idea for our team? How hard will Sarah work?
She will probably work real hard, but she'll never offer another idea again, thinking that's the last time I speak up or something like that. It sounds like the committee members that don't show up, that get assigned new tasks. Yeah.
Well, in all probability, the team will build on Sarah's idea.
Sure.
And by building on it, now they own it. They're no longer executing Cam's idea or Bob's idea. They're executing our idea. And there's times where a leader understands, wait a minute, now, involvement breeds commitment. And when I ask, I'm hearing better ideas, but I'm also involving them. They're gaining ownership. They're going to work much harder when they feel like their name is on the idea. Their name is on the plan. Yeah. And so a leader who leads with questions that begins to understand that says, wow, I will end up being more effective by involving them. And yes, it's a change of behavior, but it goes back to it's still simple. Now, Cam, if we can go down another path for a moment.
Sure, please.
We've been talking about leading with questions, and you could think, well, Bob, does this mean a leader should always lead with questions? And the answer is no. Again, when I speak, I ask people actually to text me out of the audience, hey, when you lead, what are the advantages of telling? And there are advantages. And then when you lead, what are the advantages of asking questions? And certainly when you're training somebody to do something they have never done, telling them, in fact, if we're being trained, we want to be told, how do we do this?
It's a good point to make. That's a very good point to make. There are times when telling is necessary.
Yes. In an emergency situation, the building's on fire. You don't call a committee and say, hey, what do you all think we might do here?
Right.
If it's, you're deep in a cavern someplace, you love the guy who says, follow me. I know the way out.
Right. Yeah.
And lots of times. But the truth is, Cam, if we can imagine our right arm to be our telling arm, most of it would say it's well developed. If we imagine our asking arm to be our left arm, most of us would say, well, it's not quite as well developed as our telling arm. And the idea is we want to strengthen our asking arm because most of us are good to go on telling. But there certainly are times that, wisdom is knowing when to tell and when to ask.
Yeah. How do you train this, Bob? Let's assume there's somebody out here that says, I'm a fairly good question asker. I feel like a lot of the influence I have is through my ability to understand when and how and what questions to ask. But I've got some staff or some team or some salespeople that are really hung up on telling, and I think I could make them 10x more effective if I could teach them to ask. How do you train this?
Well, Cam, on one hand, it's simple, and then on the other hand, it's a lifelong journey. Yeah. In terms of increasing effectiveness. Besides the book we've been talking about, which is published by Wiley, Leading with Questions, Edition 3, and available at bookstores or Amazon. But I've also authored 5 free ebooks, and 2 of them in particular that I'd highly recommend, and they're free, is go to leadingwithquestions.com, which is my blog. And on the top, you'll see the word books. And Great Leaders Ask Questions. And Now That's a Great Question. They're both available for free. And I think reading those, well, one of my mentors a long time ago said, Bob, I have an interesting hobby. He said, might you have any idea what my hobby is? Oh, I had no idea. Not any. Well, he said, I collect things. What do you think I collect? And I said, well, stamps, coins. He said, well, I said, I bet you collect baseball cards or, those kind of things. And again, he shook his head. No, he said, Bob, I collect questions. And I thought, wow. And he had to explain it a little bit. It didn't immediately make sense to me. But he said, the great thing about questions is you can steal them, borrow them. When somebody says, hey, Cam, that's a great question, add it to your list. But also when you hear a great question, write it down.
Yeah.
And in Great Leaders Ask Questions, I share a Fortune 100 list of my favorite questions. Most of them not original with me, but I've heard from someone else.
I've got that book here. You sent it to me in advance of this conversation, and I see some of them here are might questions, which is part of the book that I've read, is how to add might to your question. How might we do that? How might that look? How might the outcome change? Things like that. It allows the asker, it throws the responsibility to the person being asked to imagine, to come up with some new things.
Then I'd invite our listeners to subscribe to my blog. Go to leadingwithquestions.com. Subscribing is free. Go to the bottom, enter your email address, click subscribe, and you'll join leaders from 190 countries who are committed to increasing their leadership effectiveness.
The book, folks, is called Leading with Questions. I'll say it again. Co-authored by Bob Tiede and Michael Marquardt. You can find it on Wiley, which is where two of my books, I guess, were published myself. You can find it on Wiley. You can find it on Amazon, which is where I got mine. And then Bob generously sent me a copy that I am going to find someone very close to me to give it away to, because I know they'll appreciate it. Bob, thank you so much for your time. Bob Tiede, everybody.
Thank you, Cam.
Take care, Bob. You're listening to What's Working. We'll be back after this break with final comments. Be right back.
I'm Joey Mason. For 4 years, my goal has been to produce the best farm-to-table products I'd ever eaten. I've done just that at our on-site USDA facility in Grand Bay, Alabama, allowing us to ship directly to your door. This is true farm-to-table. Visit us at masonhillsfarm.com to see all that we have to offer.
Bob Tiede wanted me to mention these links to you. First is leadingwithquestions.com is where you can find his blog, and it sounds like he's a very active blogger. You can find his new thoughts and insights, perhaps new questions that he feels are very relevant at that website. Again, leadingwithquestions.com. The second link that he wanted to share is leadingwithquestions.com/books, where you can find the free ebooks that he has available. He sent me copies of these ebooks in a printed format. Great Leaders Ask Questions, a Fortune 100 list, the little book of big quotes. Oh, that's not questions, but a lot of things that he sent me. The man is a disciple of his work. He captures and collects the things that he learns and makes them available to you and me. Now, I will say this about questions, and I agree with everything Bob says, but I was in a workshop the other day delivering content to a group, and having picked my way through Bob's book, this book from Wiley, Leading with Questions, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to try this in this workshop that I'm leading. There was about 25 people in the room, and I'm just going to ask questions and see if I can teach this point without statements. See if I can teach this point without telling, but instead only by asking. And I made the mistake in announcing what I was going to try to do. and ultimately saying, I'm going to teach you all by asking questions. What ended up happening is the people in the room kind of joined in and only responded with questions. So as I'd ask a question, they'd ask a question back. And I'd ask a question, and they'd ask a question back. And it became fun and funny, and it was a light moment on the program. But it made me realize that at some point, you've got to lead. Not lead, poor term. You've got to make statements. You've got to discuss. You've got to give and deliver your expertise, not with a question mark at the end, but with a period at the end. And you can only go so far, I guess, if you're the expert, by leading with questions. You can galvanize people to your point of view with questions that makes them reconsider their position. And as crazy as it sounds, and as we record this, there's an election looming in November. And I don't know anybody who has moved from one political position to another in the past perhaps 5 to 7, maybe 9 years. And the only way I would guess to do it would be a series of questions that asks them to reflect on things. I don't know. It would be interesting to see if a series of high-impact questions could cause any of us that are galvanized politically to reconsider our point of view. That would be the ultimate test of the ability to ask questions. All right, that'll wrap us for this week. Go find Cam Marston on all your social media. Follow me, ping me, post me, peg me, whatever the terms may be. Tweet me, etc. We try to keep it active out there. We've gotten active on a weekly email, too. The coolest things that I found this week. You can go to my website, cammarston.com, to sign up for that email. And if you don't like what you get, unsubscribe. Good Lord knows I do it all the time. Have a good week, everybody. As you likely know, this show originates as a radio show broadcast across the state of Alabama, and it continues to grow in both radio listeners and market. After it's formatted for radio, we then turn it into this podcast. Please share it with those you think would find it interesting, and subscribe to the podcast on my YouTube page, where you can leave messages and your thoughts and your comments, and I'll certainly get back in touch. Finally, if you're a fan of the show, please offer a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. You can find my book called What Works on Amazon.com. In it, I highlight the top 10 ideas from the first 200 episodes of the show. Mind you, they're not the top 10 best episodes, they're the top 10 best ideas. Many times the same ideas are brought up again and again by different guests, and we dig into those ideas in such a way that they'll be easily applicable for your business. Simply go to Amazon and enter my name, and you'll find What Works as well as my other books. Chapter titles include How to Find a Niche, Innovation, Building Teams, and so forth. To learn more about the workshops and seminars I offer, go to cammarston.com. There you can view clips of my work, view workshop titles, view my reviews, case studies, customer lists. It's all there. If you'd like a free copy of one of the chapters of my book, enter your email address at the bottom of the homepage at cammarston.com. And from that site, you can email me directly. I always love to hear from you. You'll also find me on social media. Find Cam Marston on all the social media platforms, and you may need to enter the numeral 1. There's one other Cam Marston out there, and that numeral 1 distinguishes me from him from time to time. So if you're unsure if it's me or not, enter that numeral 1 after my name, and it should do the trick. On a more personal and less professional side, I record weekly commentaries that air across Alabama on Alabama Public Radio twice each day on Fridays, called Keeping It Real. They've won statewide and national awards. They're simple observations on the world as it goes on around me, and they're only a few minutes long. They're a passion. You can find them on the same podcast app you're using to listen to this. Finally, if you're interested in advertising on this podcast or the radio show, reach out. I've worked hard to cultivate a specific listener, and I can tell you all about them, and I have many different options for helping you reach them. Thanks again for listening. We'll have another episode available soon.